Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Crafted Creations. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Swamp Thing from this into this. We're going to use some basic washing method here, using just a few simple colors, some browns, greens, and blacks. We're going to use some apple barrel chocolate bar brown to get started. And this McFarlane Toys figure has a beautiful sculpt, but it definitely could use a little bit of help with the paint on there, just to make this depth stand out quite a bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix up some earth tones here, and we're going to use some washes to kind of call out some of that detail and make this figure truly stand out. First we're going to go ahead and mix up some colors. We're going to start with the chocolate bar, the black, and then we've got a tan apple barrel here as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix all these colors together using different shades, but you want to keep the colors blended together so that way each one kind of ties together and definitely blends a lot better when you get a better, smoother finished product. First we're going to take our brown, and with a damp brush and all your excess paint kind of wiped off of there, similar to like a dry brush technique, you're going to first go ahead and just kind of dot in the areas where you want that brown to kind of fade in. And then while the paint is wet, you're going to want to go ahead and dab your brush in the water and go ahead and just fill in those areas again. And what that'll do is the water will go ahead and lift up the paint, and as the water evaporates, the paint will actually settle into the cracks. So on the surface area you won't get a whole lot of coverage, but it'll settle into all those dark, deep crevices and give you a lot more of a shadowy look to it. And on the figure itself, there's a couple different types of textures. There's some wood bark that we're going to go ahead and use this brown wash on. There's also some hardened kind of armor looking plant, leafy looking areas along the shoulder, parts of the leg, and some of the chest area. Those I'm going to use a darker green. And then there's also a mossy area as well that kind of has a little bit of a spongy look to it. We're going to use a different shade of brown on that than the bark. And then we're going to use some dark greens and some murky kind of brownish blacks to kind of fill in some of the shadows to make that pop and give a lot more depth at the end there. And don't forget to always keep the brush wet. Go back into those areas after you've laid down your layer of paint. You want to keep that going constantly as you work throughout the area, just to make sure that when it dries that you don't get a super thick coat on there. It'll give it kind of a muted, shadowy, murky look. The nice thing with using these water-based paints is if you don't like how it looks, just rinse it off and try it again. Now that we've got a nice dark brown coat going, we're going to go ahead and start working on some of those darker greens. And I tried to use the color of the plastic as well as a highlight, so that I applied the darker shades around those highlighted areas and then strategically kind of wiped off some of the paint in certain areas so that I could keep that original color as part of the paint job with this finished product looks. So in any of the areas that are closer towards your eye, higher towards the surface, those are going to have a little bit of a lighter shade, and then some of the parts deeper into the depth, those will have more browns and blacks and darker greens. And then here what I'm doing is I'm taking that same shade of green that I just laid down and mixing it with the brown that's next to it. I'm trying to create a mid-tone there so that it'll blend together better. And then what you do is you take that color with a wet brush, and when you push down with your brush, you apply a little bit of pressure. It'll smear those two colors together with that mid-tone color along with the water, and that'll help blend to get a nice smooth gradient. And then here, using a little bit lighter shade, just applying a little bit of a highlight with the brown on top of that green, on top of the brown that we went in there. Depending on how you want this to look, you can use different methods, but I wanted this to blend very, very well, looking like he just came out of the swamp. Wanted him to look like he'd been under there for a while and had things growing on him, that he was still fresh out of the water. And then here with the lighter yellow going in with some highlights on there again. What I did on the corner on the shoulder there before, used a similar technique that I use for weathering helmets to kind of highlight on the corners of certain textures. I find that creates a nice highlight, and it makes certain textures stand out a lot better, especially when you're doing battle damage weathering on like armor plates. You could just take your brush and scrape it along the corner of the edge there, and it'll give a nice little shine to it. When you think about how things wear in the natural world, always the corners and the edges usually wear off first, so those are the ones you want to pay the most attention to when you're doing highlights or weathering. And the back didn't have quite as much of the bark on there, so I didn't use nearly as much of the brown. That was mostly green, except for the butt area. Feel free to leave some comments down below about the brown butt area. Poor swamp thing. Now, depending on how much detail you want to go, you could sit here for hours, for days, just keep going on this thing, but it really doesn't take too much to get him to pop out a lot of those details. Really just kind of have to decide what colors you want to go with. I've seen some pretty cool customs of this guy already. This one I wanted to go with some earth tones, more of a darker, murky look. Want him to be more imposing and not as cartoony as the bright green. I like the idea of Swamp Thing himself being that nice, deeper deeper, vibrant green, but just from being underneath the water for so long, having all these other things growing on him created all those other colors and textures. Here I'm using a very, very dark green with a little bit of brown, but this definitely has a darker shade of green to it. That darker green color I was using for the leaf looking parts. For those parts with the plates, I wanted it to stand out more from the rest of the armor, the rest of the plant life on him. So I tried to make that more of a sharper color tone. I didn't wash that nearly as much and blend it as much as I did with the other parts of his body, just because I wanted some contrast on there. So I wanted those to really stand out and look like they were a different part. So there you have it, the custom painted McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Swamp Thing. If you like this project and want to see more, please like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below. If you liked this, let me know what you think. And as always, folks, stay crafty.